So what exactly are God dots, anyway? Good question. And that's what we're going to be talking about on today's episode. Welcome to God Dots Radio, bringing you unforgettable stories of divine connections. These are real stories about real people who experienced a coincidence so amazing, God must be in it. I'm your host, the God Dots guy, Kevin Norberg. Hey, God's been up to something good again. Hey everybody, I'm Kevin Norberg, but you can call me the God Dots guy. Today we're going to be talking about what God Dots are. What are these divine connections or divine appointments that we're talking about, these stories? The way I look at God Dots is two dots connect. It happens every day. Some people in business call it networking. Other people call it karma or finding serendipity. But when two dots connect and it creates a coincidence that's so amazing you can't explain it, that may be a God dot. And that's the story that I want to hear. When God connects the dots, those are the stories we want to talk about. If it's a divine appointment, then only God can set that appointment, right? But He uses us. We're part of that. If you go on our website, which is goddots.org, O-R-G, goddots.org, you'll see our logo. And the God Dots logo is really a triangle. It's three dots in a triangle. And the top dot connects to the left and draws a line down to the second dot. And then there's a line that goes almost all the way over to the third dot of the triangle, the lower right side, and then three smaller dots that go back up to the first dot. So if you picture a triangle, the dot at the top, that's God. He starts it. He initiates all of it. He connects with someone, might be us, might be someone we know or a perfect stranger. He connects with someone, and that person, whether it's us or whoever it is, needs to connect to another person. That's a divine appointment. God sets those appointments, and they happen, well, there are a lot of words that we can use for that. Coincidence, happy accident, karma. A lot of people describe coincidences in different ways, and I've heard people even use the word God incidents, which I like, a God incident instead of a coincidence. But those are coincidences that are so amazing, and you sit back and look at it and you say, nah, that's not a coincidence. That there's some design to that. There's somebody is working behind the scenes. There's a TV show on that some of you may watch or have heard of on CBS. And as I'm recording this, it's early in 2020. The show started about a year ago on CBS, and it's called God Friended Me. And what's really, really interesting is that I got the download on the idea for God Dots about 6 months before God Friended Me hit the air. It took me some time to lay the groundwork for God Dots and get things set up to start collecting stories. So we trademarked it and protected it, and then also had to set up the website and get the Facebook group ready, and all this took time. In the meantime, this TV show comes on the air called God Friended Me. And in the show, the main character is an atheist. His father is a pastor, a Christian man, and the son has a podcast. He calls himself the Millennial Prophet, which is kind of a play on words because he doesn't believe in God. And his whole podcast is all about atheism and why it's cool. Well, one day, this young man with the podcast gets friended by God. God actually sends him a friend request He deletes it. He thinks somebody's messing with him and thinks somebody pranking him or whatever, and so he goes about his way, and then he gets another friend request from God. He deletes that one. And I don't know, the third or the fourth friend request, he finally starts thinking, who is this? Who's messing with me? Who's pranking me? So he accepts the friend request. The moment he does, he gets a friend suggestion for another person on Facebook, on social media. And the person whose friend suggestion he got was the guy that just walked past him. That's pretty weird. So he starts following this guy to try. He figures this guy must be responsible for it, or know the person who's doing this to him. So he starts following this guy, and he ends up at the end of the episode. He ends up helping the guy. The guy had a real need, and he was able to help him through the problem, whatever it was, help him solve the problem, and met a need for another person. That's a divine appointment. It's like getting a friend request from God. And when you get the friend request and you accept it, then God gives you a friend suggestion. That's a God dot. That's the triangle. That's God connecting to you and you connecting to another person. And then the three little dots that go back up to the top dot, back up to God, those three little dots indicate that completes the circuit. And when the circuit is completed, God's mission is accomplished in that God dot. Somebody received what they needed, they got it from you, or they got it from someone else, and you met a need, or another person met a need, and God blessed both of you through that encounter. That's a God dot. And I'll tell you the story sometime of how God dots came to be. It was actually a divine appointment. I'll tell you about that sometime. But that's what God dots are. It's a divine connection or a divine appointment that God sets up. The appointment might happen with somebody you know. It might be a close friend. It might be a relative. It might be your spouse. It might be a parent or a child. But you had no intention of a conversation taking a different turn and going a different direction. But when it did, it met a need for that other person. And you said something, or you did something that other person needed to hear or needed from you. And when you did that, that was a divine appointment or a divine encounter, a divine connection. That's a God dot. So not all God dots involve another person, though. I have to admit, there are some God dot moments that happen in other ways. We've had some people post in the Facebook group, the God Dots Facebook group, about dreams that they've had or visions that they've had. Visions and dreams can be another way that God connects with you. And that doesn't involve another person. It just involves a new way for him to reach you. It can be something you read. You're reading along and you flip the page and bam, there is something right on that page that you needed an answer for. And there it is, right in front of you in black and white. It might be something on television. It could be on a podcast that you're listening to. Maybe you'll be listening to a God Dots podcast, to one of our episodes, and you hear a story, and that story is a breakthrough moment for you because it answers a question or solves a mystery, solves a puzzle, something that you needed to hear. And that's a God Dot connection. Now, a podcast obviously is going to involve another person, but they don't have to physically be in the same space with you. So those are all different ways that God can connect with us. We'll talk too some more as we go through these episodes about how to be intentional about God dots. And you say, well, if it's a God dot, if it's a divine appointment, how can I be intentional about that? I can't set the appointment. God has to do that. I don't have anything to do with it. Well, yes, you do. There are really three things that you have to do. The first thing is to be available. Think of the word ability. In fact, if you can write it down, if you got a piece of paper and a pencil and you're not driving, write down the word ability or picture it, ability. A lot of us think that it's our ability that's important. No. God puts another word or another descriptor in front of ability, and it's avail. You avail yourself. Availability. Your availability is far more important to God than your ability. Isn't that cool? You don't need to depend on skills, or you don't have to have certain talents. You don't have to be a prophet. You don't have to be a non-prophet. You don't have to be a professional Christian, someone who's paid to do this. God wants to use you just exactly as you are and where you are. And all you have to be is available. So your availability is the first thing. If you're available, and sometimes it requires God getting our attention, sometimes it requires Him opening up a hole in your schedule. You know, we get ourselves scheduled out. We're going to do this from 12 to 1, and then we've got something at 1. We're meeting somebody for coffee at 2:15, and then we have to get to our school to pick up our kid. Then we've got to take them to a Girl Scout meeting or after-school curriculum, after-school activities. Then in the evening, we've got dinner to make, we've got dishes to clean, then we've got to get the kids to do homework. Or if you're single and you don't have a spouse or kids, you've got something important you've got to do for the next day at work. Our schedules are so busy and so full that God can't get into our day planner. And so sometimes He has to wait. He's patient, and He'll wait for a hole to open up in our schedule. And a lot of times those are interruptions to us. They're distractions, a canceled appointment, or somebody's late. Somebody's running late to an appointment. You missed the bus, or somebody forgot to come and pick you up, or the car stalled. It won't start. I mean, those are all interruptions, and those can be disappointing. But I have this interesting picture in my head, and I actually put it in the Facebook group for God Dots. If you take the word disappointments and change one letter, it changes everything. And that one letter is the first letter of disappointments. Change the D to an H, and what do you get? His appointments. Disappointments can become His appointments. And that's usually a great sign of a God dot moment. When you have a disappointment, when you have a setback, when you have an interruption, when you have a cancellation, those are holes in your schedule that give God an opportunity to get on your day planner, to get on your calendar, and to connect you with someone for a reason. So watch for those opportunities. Be intentional about that. So be available, and you have to be around people to be available. You've got to be where people are. So if you work in an office and you have your own cubicle or your own office, or you're at school, you need to be around other people. And the more you are around other people, the more opportunity there is for God Dots moments. If you are watching TV at home, or you have your earphones in and you're tuned out, there's no opportunity for you to connect with anyone. And you're pretty much shutting out the world and shutting out the opportunity for a God Dot. And maybe you need the God Dot. Maybe God wants to send somebody to you, but He can't because you're not available. So that's the first thing. Be available and make yourself as available as you can. Don't worry about your ability, just worry about your availability. The second thing is, when you have an opportunity for a connection, you need to tune into God's frequency. When you tune the radio in your car and you tune it to a certain station, if you're off channel, all you're going to get is static. You're not going to hear it clearly. You got to tune right in. And the way to do that is to pray, to talk to God, and then be quiet, be still, and listen. And the more you listen for God's voice, the more you begin to get prompts, and the more you begin to hear, and you begin to learn how to listen for the whisper. And I can tell you from experience that whisper comes through pretty loud and clear when God's trying to reach you and use you in a situation. So if you're available and you're listening, then the third thing is you need to act. You need to take action. You need to do something with that prompt. So be available and listen. Learn to listen for the whisper or the prompt, and then take action. Do something. Say something. When you do that, God's going to get the idea that, hey, Kevin's a God dots guy. He's a go-to guy for me. I can go back to Kevin and ask him. I know he'll be available. I know he'll listen when I prompt him, and I know he'll do the right thing. And the more you do that, the more God entrusts you to do that. And so the more God dot moments will come your way. And some of those God dot moments will not just be you helping someone else. It'll be someone else being a divine appointment and connecting with you. And that's God's favor. That's when he sends somebody along your path and you go, oh my goodness, guess I was in the right place at the right time with the right person. Yeah, because God connected the dots. And that's what it's all about. That's what these stories are all about. That's God dots, guys. That's what being a God dot is. So today, if you want to take action, just decide, today I'm going to be someone's miracle. I'm going to give them a smile. I'm going to help them if they're struggling with something, or help somebody get across the street. Hold the door for them if they've got their arms full and you see that you can be a help. Those are just little things. They're random acts of kindness, or some ways that people describe that, or paying it forward. But I call them God dots because you are being God to that person, for that person. You're stepping in and taking that role just for a moment and helping them, and maybe saying the right thing to someone. I like to go into Costco and Sam's Club, and if you go in there often, they have we affectionately call it the senior bar. And I can get away with saying that because I am one. I'm a senior. We call it the senior bar because there are a lot of seniors who work at Costco and Sam's Club who give out samples. And there are a lot of seniors who like to take the samples, including me. I like to go from one station to the next and sample things. It's kind of cool. And if you time it right, you don't even have to go out for lunch. You can just go to the senior bar at Costco. And so I was in I think it was maybe Sam's Club. I was at Sam's Club a couple weeks ago, and there was a lady there who was assigned to do these samples. And she had something she was cooking in a little oven, and a little toaster oven, then taking them out and having to cut them up into quarters or eighths and put them on little serving dishes with toothpicks in them. And so she was busy doing that, and I could tell that at that particular moment, she would rather be somewhere else. She really wasn't into it. She wasn't enjoying her job at that moment. So I just took it on myself. When I walked up to her, I put a big smile on my face, and I looked her in the eye, and I said, "Ma'am, you have the best job at Sam's Club." She looked at me like, "What planet are you from?" And I said, "You put smiles on people's faces, and you're one of the most popular people in here. Look at the line that's forming behind me right now." She looked up, she saw me, she saw 3 or 4 people in line waiting to get what she had, and her eyes lit up, a light popped on inside, and she put a smile on her face, and it brightened her day. It didn't cost me anything. I gave that smile away, and I just said a few words, but I could tell that it changed her day. It gave her a reason for what she was doing. That was just being a God dot to someone who was a perfect stranger, but it was an opportunity that I could take to do that. And we can all do that. Every single day we can be someone's miracle. Miracles come in all sizes and shapes and packages, and little tiny miracles are the stuff that all of life is made of. I was talking to a guy who is a physicist, and in fact, quantum physics is kind of his expertise. We were kind of communicating about God dots. I mentioned something to him that I said a God dot can be so small, it doesn't have to be this huge miracle. It can be so small, it can just be a particle. In fact, I said, on my web page, when you go to goddots.org, you see this header that's full of something called particles. They're the smallest, tiniest piece of science that a scientist can study, a particle. It's the tiniest object. A particle, atoms are bigger than particles. Cells are bigger than particles. But a particle is like a God dot. It's what holds everything together. Particles, when you combine them, are what hold us as people together. They hold objects together. They hold the universe together. And God's designed it from a micro level. It doesn't have to be macro all the time. Micro. Think small, a particle, as tiny as a particle. If you haven't seen this yet, go to goddots.org and take a look at the header. That's called particles. And what's really cool is there's a surprise in there for you. The particles move on the God dots page. They move, and some of them are connected. There are lines drawn between them. They're all interconnected. But if you do this on a desktop computer and you drag your cursor over the header, wherever the arrow points, the dots kind of follow your cursor. They're following it. And then when you click anywhere in the header, it forms a new dot, and all the dots, it sends out connections to all of the dots around it. That's what God dots are. On a micro level, a particle. And that's what we need to be doing. That's what we need to do every single day, and look for those opportunities. So be available, listen to the prompt or the whisper, and then act on it. The last thing that I have for you today is go visit our Facebook group. Again, it's facebook.com/groups/goddots. And join the group if you haven't already. Become a member, and you can go in there and read the posts, see what other people are saying, comment on them, and then post your own stories when you have God dots to share. Our guest on the next podcast can't recall the exact moment he died, but we talk about it on the podcast. So there's a little teaser for you, the next episode. Thanks for listening today. Thanks for tuning into God Dots Radio. And I hope that you can be a miracle to someone this week. Be a God Dot. Again, my name's Kevin Norberg, the God Dots guy. And we'll tell you more about what God's been up to in the next episode. Thanks for listening. And remember, God is looking out for you. Thanks for listening to God Dots Radio. If you enjoyed today's program and want to know more, check out our website, goddots.org. Please subscribe to the podcast to stay connected. And to read and submit stories, be sure to join our free Facebook group, facebook.com/groups/goddots. Join me, the God Dots guy, next time for more unforgettable stories of divine connections on God Dots Radio. God Dots is a ministry of God Dots International. And don't forget, God is looking out for you.